The room smelled like polished wood and fresh coffee, the kind of place where important decisions were made quietly and lives were changed without warning. Daniel Hale stood near the back wall, unnoticed, listening as his brother spoke at the front of the long table. The words came confidently from Marcus's mouth, smooth and rehearsed, and each one landed like a small cut. "I'm proud to step into this role," Marcus said, smiling at the board members. "As the new director, I plan to take this company to the next level." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had not been told. No call, no warning. Just this moment, delivered in public, wrapped in applause. 10 years. That was how long Daniel had given this company. 10 years of early mornings, late nights, missed birthdays, and broken promises to himself. He had started when the business was barely surviving, when creditors called daily and employees feared layoffs. Daniel stayed. He fixed problems quietly. He earned trust. His father had watched him do it all and promised him more than once that leadership would one day be his. Marcus had not been there for those years. Marcus came and went, chasing ideas, spending money, failing loudly, then disappearing again. Yet now he stood tall, claiming the future as if it had always been his. Daniel scanned the room, hoping to see their father's face, hoping this was some kind of mistake that would be corrected. The chair at the end of the table was empty. Their father was unwell, according to the email sent that morning. Daniel felt the absence like a deliberate move, not an accident. The applause ended. Marcus thanked everyone and continued talking about growth, innovation, and bold leadership. Daniel recognized the phrases. They were his words, lifted from old presentations, reshaped just enough to sound new. The theft felt personal. Memories flooded Daniel's mind. Nights spent alone in the office, arguments with suppliers. The day he convinced investors not to pull out when failure seemed certain. He remembered his father's hand on his shoulder, the quiet pride, the promise spoken in private. All of it felt erased in one careless announcement. When the meeting ended, people gathered around Marcus, shaking his hand, congratulating him. Daniel slipped past them, unseen, as if his years of effort had made him invisible. As he reached the door, Marcus caught his eye. For a moment, their gazes locked. Marcus's smile flickered, then returned, sharper than before. It wasn't just victory. It was challenge. Daniel walked out without a word. The elevator ride down felt endless. His reflection in the mirrored wall looked calm, almost detached. But inside, his thoughts raced. Betrayal was not the loud kind he had imagined. There was no shouting, no dramatic reveal. It was quiet, polite, and perfectly legal. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, people laughed. Daniel stood still, realizing that something fundamental had shifted. He had believed loyalty mattered. He had believed work spoke for itself. He had believed family meant protection. That belief was gone. At home, Daniel sat in the dark, replaying the meeting again and again. Each detail sharpened the sense of being used. Marcus hadn't just taken a title. Had taken Daniel's future and worn it like a badge. Anger came slowly, building beneath the surface. It wasn't explosive, it was focused. It asked questions Daniel couldn't ignore. Why now? Why publicly? Why without warning? The answers formed a single truth that settled deep in his chest. Marcus had planned this. Daniel opened his laptop and began reviewing old emails, contracts, and financial reports. At first, he told himself he was only trying to understand what had happened. But as the hours passed, something else took shape. He noticed gaps, weak points. Choices Marcus had already made that were reckless, driven by ego rather than care. By morning, Daniel understood that this was more than a stolen promotion. The company was being steered by someone who wanted recognition, not responsibility. Sleep never came. In the days that followed, Daniel played his role well. He congratulated Marcus in private. He listened without reacting as his brother spoke about earning the position. Marcus talked as if this outcome had been inevitable, as if Daniel's years of work were simply a warm-up act. That hurt more than the announcement itself. Daniel watched Marcus closely. He saw the impatience, the hunger for praise, the need to prove himself to a room that never doubted Daniel. For the first time, Daniel considered something he had never allowed himself to think. Maybe this wasn't just betrayal. Maybe it was war. Still, doubt followed him. Revenge felt heavy, dangerous. Daniel had always believed he was better than petty payback. Yet every time he imagined walking away, he felt hollow. Walking away would mean accepting that effort meant nothing, and promises were disposable. Late one night, Daniel stood in front of the company building, lights glowing above him. He remembered standing there years ago, terrified the business would collapse. He had stayed then. It fought then. This was no different. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't feel excited. It felt steady. If Marcus wanted the company, Daniel would show him what ownership really meant. Daniel spent the following weeks in quiet observation, a shadow moving through the office that had once been his domain. He attended meetings without comment, listened to Marcus speak, and watched as the new director made decisions that were bold but careless. Marcus was confident, persuasive, and completely unaware of how fragile his position truly was. Daniel noticed every misstep, every tiny oversight that could unravel months of work. The more he observed, the clearer it became. Marcus was gambling with the company, not running it. At night, Daniel's apartment became a war room. Financial reports, investor statements, and shareholder documents spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle. He analyzed debts, evaluated investments, and calculated the weight of each decision Marcus made. There were opportunities hiding in plain sight, errors that no one else had noticed, moments where Marcus's arrogance left him exposed. Daniel knew he could act, but he didn't rush. Patience was part of the plan. Acting too soon would spoil everything. The internal struggle was relentless. Daniel's anger simmered under the surface, but alongside it came doubt. He replayed childhood memories of Marcus, the teasing, the competition, the occasional moments of brotherly warmth, and questioned whether this was truly betrayal or just Marcus finally stepping up in the only way he knew how. Marcus had always wanted to be recognized, always felt overlooked. Was Daniel justified in plotting revenge, or was he letting pride dictate his actions? Daniel wrestled with morality. Revenge could be satisfying, a dramatic undoing of Marcus's arrogance, but it could also destroy more than it fixed. He pictured Marcus humiliated, exposed to the board and the employees, pride shattered. The image brought a brief thrill, followed by unease. He knew that satisfaction gained from another's pain was fleeting. The real victory would be smarter, cleaner, and undeniable. Weeks turned into months as Daniel quietly built leverage. He reached out to trusted investors, people who knew his competence and valued stability over showmanship. He reviewed contracts for hidden clauses Marcus would overlook in his rush to impress the board. He researched market opportunities that could secure financial control. Slowly, meticulously, he positioned himself to reclaim what had been promised to him, not through confrontation, but through strategy and insight. During this time, Marcus became increasingly reckless. He pursued ambitious deals without consulting his team, spending money on ventures with high risk and questionable returns. He gave presentations full of flashy projections but lacking substance, believing that style alone would mask gaps in judgment. Employees whispered in corners, uncertain whether to follow his vision or fear failure. Marcus's confidence was unshakable, but cracks appeared, subtle yet undeniable. Daniel observed all of it without revealing his own hand. He met with key employees privately, not to sabotage Marcus, but to gauge their loyalty and assess the company's real health. He documented errors quietly, building a mental map of weaknesses and strengths. Every board member, every investor, every policy became a piece of a larger plan. Daniel's mind was calm, even as he felt tension coiling inside him. The desire for revenge was present, but it was disciplined. There was no rush. Patience was. As Daniel watched Marcus, he noticed something else. The younger brother genuinely believed in his own vision. Marcus felt justified. He had convinced himself that Daniel was cautious to a fault, that the company needed boldness, and that leadership required flair over diligence. Marcus's confidence was absolute. Daniel realized that the man standing before him was not evil. He was reckless, entitled, and blind to consequences. But he believed his actions were necessary. This understanding complicated Daniel's feelings. Revenge was no longer just about taking back what was his. It became a test of self-control, judgment, and the kind of person he wanted to be. He could humiliate Marcus publicly, prove him wrong, and bask in the satisfaction of righting a perceived wrong. Or he could do it quietly, decisively, ensuring Marcus learned nothing through humiliation but through consequence. Daniel chose the latter. He began preparing a financial strategy that would secure control of the company without confrontation. He acquired shares quietly, using trusted partners to avoid detection. He tracked Marcus's deals, making subtle adjustments to ensure that the company remained viable even if Marcus's choices failed. Each move was precise, calculated, and invisible. Daniel's mind was sharp, focused on the end goal while controlling the emotional surge that could ruin everything. The psychological weight of this period was immense. Daniel often woke in the night, heart racing, mind cycling through possibilities. He imagined the confrontation, the moment Marcus realized he was outmaneuvered. He considered the feelings of employees, investors, and even his father, who had always trusted him to act wisely. Each scenario required careful thought. Acting too soon could backfire. Waiting too long might allow Marcus to dig the company into a hole too deep to climb out of. Through it all, Daniel maintained a calm exterior. He greeted Marcus politely in meetings, never betrayed his awareness, and never showed anger. To outsiders, he was the composed brother, the one who had quietly supported the company for years. Inside, he was a storm, navigating ethical dilemmas, emotional strain, and strategic planning simultaneously. The struggle reached a tipping point one evening when Daniel discovered a serious error in one of Marcus's major investment proposals. A risky merger that could have jeopardized months of work was moving forward unchecked. Daniel realized the timing was perfect. He could confront Marcus directly, expose the mistake, and assert authority. Or he could wait, using the mistake as leverage to gain complete control quietly. The moral and emotional tension was nearly unbearable. Daniel chose patience. He corrected the issue behind the scenes, ensuring the company remained stable while keeping Marcus unaware. He realized revenge wasn't about exposing weakness. It was about reclaiming power decisively and cleanly. Each small victory reinforced his strategy. Each careful maneuver strengthened his resolve. He was no longer angry in the raw sense. He was focused, disciplined, and ready for the moment that would finally shift the balance. As Marcus continued to operate with confidence. Unaware of the quiet storm building around him, Daniel's plan reached maturity. He had control of key share, support from investors, and insight into every decision Marcus made. The younger brother's arrogance and overconfidence had laid the groundwork for an inevitable conclusion. Daniel had positioned himself perfectly, but the ultimate challenge remained. When the moment came, would he act with cold precision or let emotion dictate the outcome? By the time the board next convened, Daniel had made peace with one undeniable truth. Revenge was not about humiliation. It was about justice, about restoring order, and about proving through action, not words, what leadership truly required. Marcus's ignorance, confidence, and entitlement had created a path that Daniel could walk decisively. The tension of Anticipation hung like a silent drumbeat. Each passing day, intensifying the suspense, Daniel had transformed his anger into strategy, his betrayal into opportunity, and his internal conflict into a controlled force. He understood that the coming moment would define more than the company's future. It would define who he was, how he wielded power, and whether revenge could coexist with integrity. The stage was set. All that remained was the climax. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and anticipation, a quiet tension lingering in the air as Daniel walked in. Every eye seemed to flicker toward him, though none knew the full truth. Marcus, standing at the head of the table, began his presentation with the same confidence he had carried for months. Expansion plans, flashy projections, and bold promises rolled off his tongue. Each word meant to impress, to dominate, to cement his authority. Daniel sat quietly, calm on the surface, but every fiber of him alert, analyzing, calculating. Marcus spoke. Daniel noticed small cracks in the armor. Numbers didn't align. Timelines were impossible. Risks were high, dangerously so. Employees shifted uneasily in their seats, their trust beginning to waver. Marcus's charisma had carried him far, but Daniel had prepared for this moment for months. Every investor he had spoken to, every share quietly acquired, every contract carefully reviewed had led to this one pivotal opportunity. The chance to act decisively had arrived, and Daniel could feel it. Before we continue, a voice interrupted, firm and deliberate. There's a matter regarding ownership that must be addressed. Papers slid across the table and eyes widened as the details became visible. Marcus glanced down, confusion clouding his expression, followed by disbelief. Daniel rose slowly, deliberately, meeting every gaze in the room with steady confidence. He didn't speak quickly. He let the silence build the tension. I have acquired a controlling interest in this company, Daniel said evenly. Effective immediately, I am the majority owner. The words fell like hammers. The room froze. Marcus's confident stance faltered for the first time, a flicker of fear breaking through his carefully constructed facade. He scanned the documents, realizing the extent of what had been done. Everything he had taken for granted, the title, the respect, the perception of power, was no longer his to claim. Marcus's voice cracked slightly, disbelief turning to panic. You can't be serious. This isn't possible. He looked around, searching for allies, but the faces of investors and board members told him all he needed to know. Daniel's preparation had been flawless. Every share, every legal step, every subtle maneuver had culminated in this moment. Marcus's years of arrogance and oversight had made him vulnerable. Daniel had done nothing rash. He had acted with precision, patience, and strategy. You planned this, Marcus said, words trembling between anger and hurt. All of it. Daniel's response was measured, calm, devoid of triumph. I prepared, he said, a subtle but important distinction. It was not cruelty or vengeance. That had guided Hemet was foresight and diligence. The difference hung heavily in the room. Marcus's eyes flicked around, a mix of shame, anger, and disbelief flashing across his face. For the first time, he understood that his position had been an illusion, that confidence without substance was fragile. The board voted swiftly, unanimously, reaffirming Daniel's authority. Marcus's role, once grand and commanding, diminished in an instant. As he gathered his things, shoulders tense and jaw tight, he paused at the door. Do you think this makes you better? He asked quietly. His pride and hurt mingled. A complex emotional cocktail. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He realized that words now mattered less than actions. And the look in Marcus's eyes revealed what he already knew. Power had shifted, and with it, the balance between them. Daniel's silence carried weight. I didn't do this to punish you, he said finally, calm but resolute. I did it to protect the company, to ensure it survives regardless of your ambition. Marcus shook his head slowly, wounded pride hardening into bitterness. You always needed to be right, he muttered, a bitter observation of Daniel's character. Daniel allowed a small pause, acknowledging truth without apology. And you needed to be seen, he said softly. It was not an attack but a statement of fact. Sometimes understanding comes through clarity, not confrontation. Marcus left without another word. The boardroom felt lighter once the door closed, though Daniel knew the tension lingered invisibly. The confrontation had ended, but its psychological impact would ripple through both of them for months. Daniel had won not through theatrics or public humiliation, but through careful planning and measured action. His control was absolute, undeniable. Yet satisfaction, the rush he had imagined for so long, did not arrive as he expected. Instead, Daniel felt clarity. The moment had confirmed what he already knew. Patience, preparation, and strategic thinking could accomplish more than rash action or impulsive revenge. The board members began asking questions, planning next steps, and Daniel guided them with the steady hand that had always been his strength. His decisions were clear, rational, and precise, ensuring stability without spectacle. Every choice reinforced his competence, his authority, and his foresight. Even in victory, Daniel reflected on the cost. Marcus had been a brother, a rival, and a reflection of part of himself he had once despised. Their relationship had fractured under the weight of ambition, pride, and betrayal. Daniel understood now that revenge could restore balance but not heal emotional wounds. The personal cost was inevitable, and no strategic maneuver could remove the lingering questions about trust, family, and morality. In the days that followed, Daniel solidified his authority. Employees returned to familiar routines, investors felt reassured, and the company's trajectory stabilized. Marcus, having left quietly for a smaller role elsewhere, faded from immediate influence but left a shadow of complexity in Daniel's mind. He was gone, but the lessons remained. Trust must be earned, ambition must be tempered with competence. And power is most effective when exercised with responsibility rather than pride. Late one evening, Daniel returned to the office alone. The city lights stretched before him, distant and steady, a reminder of the world outside the company walls. He realized that the true test of leadership was not in victory over others, but in the control of self. The confrontation with Marcus had demonstrated that power, strategy, and patience could achieve what brute force or emotional reaction never could. Daniel thought about the future, the company, and the legacy he wanted to leave. Revenge had been a tool, but it was not the destination. It had clarified what mattered: protection, stability, and the integrity of decisions. Marcus's departure left a void, a reminder that ambition untempered by preparation leads to collapse. Daniel's victory was quiet, strategic, and enduring, not a spectacle of humiliation, but a demonstration of deliberate action. Even as he switched off the lights and left the office, Daniel carried the weight of experience. The confrontation had been decisive, but the emotional resonance lingered. He understood now that revenge could restore what was taken, but could never fully erase the complexity of human relationships. He had reclaimed control, but he had also chosen a path defined by precision and restraint. Walking through the quiet streets, Daniel felt the balance between satisfaction and reflection. The company was safe, his authority recognized, and his strategy proven. Yet he also knew that power came with responsibility, and every action, no matter how calculated, left consequences. Revenge, he realized, was never purely about winning. It was about choosing how to act when given the opportunity. Daniel returned home with a sense of calm determination. The storm of betrayal had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. He had acted decisively, with foresight and integrity. Marcus had been defeated, yes, but more importantly, Daniel had demonstrated who he truly was a leader, a strategist, and someone capable of exercising power without surrendering to impulsive emotion. The story of that day, the boardroom confrontation, and the careful orchestration of control would remain with him forever. Victory had been achieved, but the lessons were deeper than triumph. Daniel knew that revenge could restore order, but it could also reveal the true nature of character. He had learned that patience, strategy, and self-control were more valuable than momentary satisfaction. As Daniel looked out over the city once more, he understood that the battle with Marcus was over, but the reflection on choices, morality, and consequences would continue. Power was not simply about taking what others claimed, it was about knowing when and how to act, and about understanding the cost of each decision. Daniel had reclaimed what was his, but he had done so with clarity, control, and a perspective that ensured the company and himself would endure.